Now the way that an infinite limit works just means, since infinity is not a number, you can't plug it in, but the idea of what happens when x gets really, really big. Sometimes our answer gets really, really small. Sometimes our answer just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you do plug in numbers for this one, as x gets really, really big, like if I plugged in 100, 100 squared would be even bigger, 10,000. If I plugged in a million squared is, how much would it be? Too many zeros? Can you imagine it? We had 6 zeros, and then you'd have another 6 zeros, so you would have 12 zeros, which would be trillion, right? Because million, billion, trillion. I have up here, hidden behind this wonderful dog that my daughter drew, all the names of how many zeros behind and what they mean, all the way up to having 63 zeros behind a 1, right? Which probably never comes, I don't know if there's any vigentillionaires in the world, but that would be a lot of money. But yeah, so you got billion, trillion, quadrillion, quintillion, so on, all the way up to vigentillion. If you have 60 zeros behind the 1, that would be a novemdecillion. Very important English words to know. So if you're writing, learning new English words while you're here, then you can make sure you write that one down because it comes up all the time in English conversations. So what we would say here, some places they'll say, what is the limit as x goes to infinity of x squared? They'll actually write infinity to show that it does get bigger and bigger and bigger as well. Some places, since infinity is not a word, and when you're talking about a limit, you're supposed to be approaching a value, some textbooks will say this answer does not exist. Okay? For what we're going to be doing right here, I believe that writing infinity tells us a little bit of information. It tells us that it's getting bigger, and it's getting bigger in a positive way. So it does tell us a little bit more information, because whether something goes to infinity or negative infinity, those tell us different things. So this is a little bit clearer that this is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger as we go along. Now what happens with infinite limits is that you really have to only consider the biggest power of x, because that's what's going to affect it. I don't know if you've ever played a board game. Have you played Monopoly? If you've played Monopoly, at the beginning of the game, if someone lands on Baltic, you're like, you owe me $4. Pay up. And they have to pay up all $4 and you collect it. At the end of the game, if you've got hotels on Boardwalk but you still own Baltic, and they come around the board and they land on Baltic and they owe you $4 and you have all this money, you're like, don't worry about it. That $4 no longer matters to me because it's so insignificant. In the same thing in this limit, right? If I plug in different values of x, if I plug in 2 for x, that minus 5 makes a big difference because that changes it from minus 6, right, down to minus 11 when I plug in 2. But if I plugged in 10,000, 10,000 times negative 3 is negative 30,000. If I subtract 5 from that, it doesn't really make a big difference. There's a joke out there that says, I was at a conference 2 years ago, and they said that the world was 60 billion years old. So I now know that the world is 60 billion and 2 years old. Right? That 2 doesn't make a difference once you get to. We're really only looking at the x. What happens is we put in bigger and bigger and bigger values for x. Can you see that this is becoming a bigger and bigger negative number? So we could say it does not exist in some textbooks, but here we would say negative infinity.